For 28 years, I trusted my husband. He bought a cabin in the mountains, and I found someone else's underwear. Without a tantrum, I gathered the evidence and sold the cabin. All $220,000 went to. My name is Nancy, and I've been married to Andrew for nearly 30 years. We've built our lives around each other, a steady rhythm of work, family, and occasional moments of joy that never felt forced. I've always been content with the way things were. After all, we had a good life. Andrew and I had our fair share of ups and downs, like any couple, but there were never any major red flags. At least, that's what I thought. Andrew is the dreamer in our relationship. He's always been the one with big ideas, the one who imagines the future in grandiose terms. I'm the practical one, the accountant who keeps everything in line. That's why when he came to me one summer afternoon, excited about a new investment, I didn't hesitate to support him. He had found a cabin, a charming, rustic place tucked away in the Rocky Mountains. He said it would be a perfect getaway for us, a quiet retreat where we could escape on weekends, a place to make memories. The idea sounded wonderful, and after all, who wouldn't want a cozy cabin in the mountains? So I agreed. We bought it. We'd made so many plans for that cabin, but life always had other priorities. There were bills to pay, errands to run, and family obligations to keep up with. But the dream of that cabin, the retreat that would bring us closer together, always stayed in the back of my mind. In the months that followed, I imagined weekends by the fire, reading books, and cooking together in the little kitchen. But, like many things in life, the dream remained just that, an idea, a possibility. We rarely found the time to go up there, and Andrew's business, as usual, kept him busy. As the months wore on, the cabin became more of a fantasy than a reality. Yet, I never complained. I figured that someday we'd get around to it. One Friday in October, I was in the middle of a long stretch of tax season work when Andrew suggested I take the trip to the cabin alone. "Why don't you head up there this weekend?" he said. "Take some time for yourself. I'll be tied up with clients anyway." It was odd. Andrew usually wanted me to come along, but this time, he insisted. I was taken aback, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was right. I could use a quiet weekend to myself. I packed my things, grabbed a few books, and made the drive up to the mountains. I arrived later in the afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to set. The drive was peaceful, and the autumn colors were breathtaking. But as I neared the cabin, a sense of unease began to settle in my stomach. I had no idea why. It was just a cabin after all. But something felt off. I parked in front of the cabin and stepped out of the car. The mountain air was fresh, the kind that fills your lungs with a sense of clarity. The cabin stood before me, unchanged, just as I remembered it. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the odd feeling in my chest, and walked up to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped inside, the scent of pine and wood immediately greeting me. The place looked just as it always had, charming, quaint. The living room was cozy, with the fireplace ready to be lit. I smiled to myself, imagining the evenings Andrew and I would spend here once we made the time. I set my bag down and wandered through the rooms, admiring the space. Everything felt in place until I reached the bedroom. The bed was neatly made, as it had been the last time we were here, but something caught my eye on the edge of the bed, just barely visible beneath the pillow. A bra. At first, I thought it was mine, but then I saw it clearly. A delicate lace bra, smaller than mine, the kind I would never buy. I froze. For a moment, my mind raced. Maybe I had left it behind the last time I was here? But no, I hadn't. I always made sure to pack everything before leaving. And this wasn't mine. I bent down slowly, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. The lace felt soft under my fingertips, But it was the sudden wave of nausea in my stomach that hit me the hardest. I didn't know what to think, didn't know what to do. My heart started pounding in my chest as my thoughts swirled. I wasn't about to jump to conclusions. After all, there could be an explanation. It was easy to misplace things, even in a cabin like this. But then, as I stood there, holding the bra in my hand, something inside me shifted. The doubt was planted. It couldn't be ignored. I left the cabin quietly, trying to push aside the feeling gnawing at me. I didn't say a word. The drive back was long, and the entire time, I replayed that moment in my head over and over. But I didn't let Andrew know anything. Not yet. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a coldness in the air, as if something had changed between us, without either of us realizing it. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me. My thoughts kept drifting back to the bra, to the feeling of betrayal that had started to creep in. It was the beginning of something I couldn't yet define, something that would change everything between us. The next few days were a blur of normalcy. I didn't say a word to Andrew about the bra. I didn't confront him, didn't ask questions. I didn't even show any sign that I knew something was off. We carried on as if nothing had changed, as if the discovery hadn't shattered something deep inside me. But it had, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I'd believed about my life, about our life, was a lie. I spent my days at work, my mind constantly circling back to that moment in the cabin. The bra, the strange perfume. I thought about the kind of woman who would leave something like that behind. In our bed. A younger woman, I imagined. Someone who was fresh and vibrant. Someone who might make Andrew feel alive in ways that I no longer did. I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for the truth to fall into my lap. That wouldn't be enough for me. I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to hear it from my own ears, to know, without a doubt, that my husband had betrayed me. I wasn't sure what I'd do with that proof once I had it, but I knew I couldn't live in this uncertain limbo any longer. I began with the simplest step. I installed hidden cameras. It felt like I was stepping into the role of a detective, but I wasn't looking for a grand revelation. I just wanted clarity. I started small, placing discrete cameras around the house, particularly in places where Andrew would typically go. In the living room, the kitchen, his office. I knew he would never expect me to check them. He trusted me completely, and I would use that to my advantage. At first, it was nothing. The cameras caught only normal moments. Andrew coming home from work, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reading the newspaper, and flipping through his emails. Nothing out of the ordinary. But each night after dinner, he would slip away into his office to work late or catch up on emails. His excuses had always been the same, and while I couldn't prove anything just yet, something about his behavior felt off. He was spending more time away from me than usual, and I was starting to feel like the only thing he was truly invested in was whatever was happening outside of our marriage. It wasn't until the third week that I caught my first glimpse of something unsettling. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing some tax documents when I checked the footage from the cameras. Andrew had left for the cabin that morning, telling me he needed to take care of some things. It was a routine thing. He had gone up there several times before for work, to organize or check on things, but this time was different. He wasn't alone. The woman, she was younger, probably in her late 20s, appeared in the footage. I could barely make out her face, but I knew it was her. She wasn't just any woman. This was the same woman I'd seen in his phone photos a few months back. He had never mentioned her, of course, but now, seeing her at the cabin, it became clear. She was the one he had been spending weekends with, the one who had been leaving the marks of her presence in our life. The footage didn't just show them walking into the cabin together. It showed something else, something that made my stomach churn. They were close, too close. There was an intimacy in the way they moved together, in the way they laughed. She had her hand on his shoulder, her head tilted in a way that I had never seen before. It was the kind of closeness that spoke of something more than friendship, something more than a mere business partner. I stared at the screen, trying to steady my breath. My pulse was racing, my fingers gripping the desk as if I could somehow stop the images from flashing in front of me. I knew with absolute certainty now what had been happening, but I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. Instead, I took action in a quieter, more calculated way. I started tracking his movements more carefully. I kept a notebook, noting every trip, every late night excuse, every change in routine. I also began tracking the receipts for his purchases. There were small things at first, restaurants, gas stations, but then there were larger ones, hotel reservations, trips to the same spots he'd been to before with me, but now with her, the woman. I kept everything, every detail, every receipt. I had them all neatly organized, stacked in folders on my desk, waiting. Then, one day, I saw something that pushed me to a new level of commitment in my pursuit: a flight receipt. Andrew had booked 2 tickets to a luxury resort. The destination? Somewhere tropical. Somewhere far away. They were booked for next month. That was it. It was no longer a matter of suspicion. It was confirmed. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath my skin. But it wasn't just anger. It was a sharp, calculated kind of rage. A feeling that made me think, I can't let him get away with this. Not again. I needed to take control, to make sure that when the truth finally came out, I would have the upper hand. I wasn't going to be the woman left broken and humiliated. I wasn't going to be the one who let him ruin my life without facing the consequences. The next step was the most crucial. I had everything I needed: the evidence, the proof, the receipts. But now I needed a plan, and for that, I would need help. The days dragged on as I watched Andrew go through the motions of his normal life, but everything felt different now. Every word he spoke, every glance he gave me, every moment we shared felt hollow. The life we had built together seemed like a lie. I couldn't look at him without seeing the man who had betrayed me, the man who had walked away from the woman who loved him for some fleeting moment of excitement. I had spent weeks collecting my evidence, making sure I had everything lined up before taking action. It wasn't just about proving he had betrayed me. It was about doing it on my terms. I would not let him control the narrative. I would not let him walk away unscathed, as though nothing had happened. I would make him feel the weight of what he had done. I needed to hit him where it hurt the most, and I knew exactly how to do it. For the past few weeks, I'd been working with a lawyer, someone discreet, someone who could help me navigate the next steps without drawing attention to what was coming. My lawyer, Linda, was sharp and ruthless. She knew what I wanted and was prepared to make it happen. She also understood the importance of discretion. This was not going to be a messy public confrontation. No, this was going to be surgical, clean. We began by drafting the legal documents. I had power of attorney over Andrew's affairs, a safeguard we had put in place years ago when we were both younger and more trusting. I had full access to his financials, his assets, and his properties. And of course, the cabin. I had been watching it carefully. The cabin, the one he had bought as a future investment for us, had become the symbol of everything he had lied about. It wasn't just some weekend getaway. It wasn't just an investment. It was a place where he had shared intimate moments with someone else, a place that had become his escape. Using the power of attorney, I initiated the process of selling the cabin. I could hear Andrew's voice in my head saying, "It's ours, Nancy. A place for our future, remember?" I could hear his enthusiasm, the way he sold me on the idea. But now, as I sat with Linda, the papers in front of me, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't ours anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I didn't just sell the cabin. I made sure the entire sum of $220,000 was transferred into an account I had set up under my name. But it wasn't going into my personal account. No, that money was being funneled into a charity account. A charity that supported women who had survived adultery and manipulation. The same women who had suffered the way I had. The same women who, like me, had been blindsided by betrayal. I sat there, staring at the legal documents as they were finalized. My hands were steady, my resolve unshakable. Andrew thought this was just a simple sale. He would never see what was coming. He would never understand the full weight of his actions until it was too late. The day of the sale came faster than I anticipated. Andrew had no idea. He was out of town for one of his business trips, a cover for his ongoing affair with the woman who had become a constant presence in our lives. I spent the morning making sure everything was in place. The cabin was already sold, the funds transferred, and now it was time for me to take my final step. I drove to the cabin one last time, my heart pounding in my chest. This time, there were no plans to stay. This time, there was no longing for the future we could have had here. The cabin felt empty, devoid of the life we had imagined together. I locked the door behind me, for the last time, and left. As I drove back home, I could feel the excitement rising in my chest. The final act was about to unfold. I had one last thing to do before everything changed. I took my phone out and opened TikTok. I had been preparing for this moment for days. I had documented everything, every screenshot, every receipt, every detail. I had the proof, the story, the plan. Now it was time to share it with the world. I set up my phone to record and began speaking into the camera. My voice was steady, calm. There was no hesitation in my words. "Hi, everyone," I began, the camera capturing my face in close-up. "My name is Nancy, and I want to share my story with you. It's a story about betrayal, about a marriage I thought was solid, about a future I thought we were building together." I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before continuing. I was married to a man named Andrew for almost 30 years. We had a good life, or at least, I thought we did. A few months ago, I discovered something that shattered everything I thought I knew about him. He bought a cabin in the mountains, a future investment. But it wasn't for me. It was for him and someone else. I showed the photos and documents I had saved on my phone. Screenshots of hotel bookings, receipts for dinners, and images from the hidden cameras. I walked through the timeline, each piece of evidence carefully laid out for everyone to see. But I didn't just sit back and let it happen. I continued. I took action. I sold the cabin, and I put the entire sum of $220,000 into a charity for women who've survived adultery and manipulation. I paused again, looking directly into the camera. Andrew doesn't know it yet, but I won't allow myself to be humiliated. I won't allow him to get away with this. As I spoke, I hit the live button, and within seconds, the video was streaming live to the world. The video went viral within hours. Millions of people watched as I told my story, showing the proof, speaking about my pain and my decision. The comments flooded in, some supportive, others angry, some accusing, but all of them engaged. It wasn't just my story anymore, it was everyone's story. It was a declaration that no one, no matter how long they'd been deceived, had to stay silent. I wasn't the only one who had been betrayed. I wasn't alone. But as the live stream continued, I could feel something changing in me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about taking back control of my life. And Andrew, he would never see it coming. The morning after my TikTok live stream, I woke up to a storm. My phone was flooded with messages, some supportive, others questioning, but all of them buzzing with curiosity and judgment. The video had gone viral. I was now part of the narrative, a woman who had publicly revealed her husband's betrayal and taken control of her life. And while I was still processing the enormity of it all, I knew I had done the right thing. But that wasn't the end of the story. No, the real consequences were just beginning. Andrew hadn't seen the live stream, not yet. He was still away, staying at one of the hotels I had tracked in the past. I had no doubt he was with her, the woman he had replaced me with, the one who had taken everything from me. It was almost laughable how little he seemed to care about the life we'd built together. I knew he would come home eventually, and when he did, he wouldn't just be angry. He'd be humiliated. He'd be forced to face the truth. And that truth was that he had underestimated me. I spent the next few days preparing for the fallout. I had already taken the first steps toward securing my future. The charity now had the funds it needed, and the cabin was no longer a part of Andrew's life or mine. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. He needed to feel the weight of his actions in a way he could never forget. By the time Andrew finally returned home, I was ready. My lawyer had finalized everything, and the last of the legal paperwork had been signed. The sale of the cabin had been completed, and the proceeds had been transferred to the charity without a hitch. But there was one final blow that I hadn't yet delivered. That evening, just as the sun began to set, Andrew walked through the front door. He didn't say a word. His eyes immediately searched the house, as if expecting everything to be the same. But it wasn't. I was sitting in the living room, waiting for him. I had the papers on the table in front of me, neatly stacked in a folder. The silence between us was thick, and the tension was almost palpable. I could feel his confusion, his anger building with each passing second. He could sense that something had changed, but he had no idea what. "Where is it?" he finally asked, his voice sharp, though still calm. "Where's what?" I replied, looking up from the papers. "The cabin," he said, his eyes narrowing. "The cabin's been sold, hasn't it?" I didn't answer immediately. I wanted him to stew in that discomfort for a moment longer. Let the reality of his actions sink in. "Actually, yes," I said slowly. "It's gone. The cabin was sold, Andrew. The money, it's not yours anymore." His face darkened, his jaw clenching. I could see the flicker of rage in his eyes, but it didn't faze me. He had no right to be angry. He had thrown away everything for a cheap affair, for a fleeting moment of excitement. He had made his choice, and now he had to deal with the consequences. "Where did the money go then?" he demanded, stepping closer to me. "What the hell did you do with it?" I slid the folder over to him, watching as he opened it. His eyes scanned the papers quickly, his face slowly transforming from confusion to realization. The charity's name was written clearly on the documents. He understood immediately. "You put it into some charity?" He spat, his voice filled with disgust. "After everything, this is how you're going to handle it?" I stood up, meeting his gaze head on. "Yes, Andrew, I put it into a charity for women who have been hurt by people like you, women who have been lied to, manipulated, and betrayed. You know, women who have had their lives torn apart by people who thought they could get away with it. Like you." His face turned red with anger. He started pacing, muttering under his breath, probably coming up with excuses, justifications. But I wasn't interested in hearing them. The man who had stood before me years ago, the man who had promised to love and cherish me, was long gone. In his place stood a stranger, a liar, a cheater. "I can't believe you did this to me," he said, voice trembling. "You humiliated me. You ruined everything." "Ruined everything?" I echoed. my voice calm but firm. You ruined it, Andrew, not me. You're the one who thought you could have your cake and eat it too. You're the one who broke us. I'm just making sure you pay the price for what you've done. I paused, taking a deep breath, the weight of my words sinking in. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I'm done being the woman who lets you walk all over her, I said, my voice unwavering. You've taken everything I had, my trust, my dignity, my peace of mind, and I'm not going to stand by and let you get away with it. You'll never get to hurt me again. His eyes flickered with something, whether it was guilt, remorse, or just the sting of a man realizing he's been caught in his own lies. I couldn't tell. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. He couldn't erase what he had done to me, and now he had to live with it. As I stood there, looking at him one last time, something inside me clicked. The woman I had been, the one who had tolerated so much, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to get justice is to take it for yourself. And as Andrew left the room, seething with frustration and disbelief, I knew that this was just the beginning for me. No longer would I let someone else control my narrative. This was my story, my truth, and I was finally free.